We have finally arrived on the moon. It feels like it took 2 months, but we're here now. And hey, look over there. It's a giant underground research facility built into the surface of the moon that we are just now discovering at this moment for the first time ever. That should cover us. Let's go inside. This is Vaguely Scientific. Well, it appears that most of our recording equipment is still intact. I am Derek, and joining me, as always, is Jim.
Hi.
Have you figured out what's going on with the homicidal robot replicator machine?
Yeah, Addison fell in and it got stuck on.
Yeah. We were going to have Addison as a guest this week.
Yeah, now we know what happened.
Well, while Jim works on that, I'm going to check over here behind this massive pile of inoperable killing machines. Yes, just as I suspected. It's someone else who can be our guest this week. How's it going, Chris?
Do you have it? Do you have that bottle I asked for?
Yeah, I think so. Here.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Glad you already had the glass prepared.
Oh, man.
Excited.
Man, several months of dealing with homicidal robots makes you want to drink.
I mean, that's completely fair and honest, and I mean, I feel like just being on the moon several months would make me want to drink, so.
Yeah. Oh, feeling much better now. Thank you.
Excellent.
Well, if you'd like to take your mind off of it, we were actually just about to record the show where we answer the most preposterous audience-submitted questions in a manner that we like to call vaguely scientific. Oh, but before we do that, it's time for the fun science fact of the day. Jim?
All right. I found this out a little while ago, and it made me kind of mad, so I'm going to make everyone else mad with it, too. In astrophysics, the term metallicity is used to describe elements that are heavier than hydrogen and helium. So when astronomers talk about stars or nebulas that are metal-rich, they might be talking about lithium or sodium, or it might be oxygen or carbon, which are not metals, at least in our everyday lives. But since less than 2% of normal matter in our universe is heavier than hydrogen and helium, it's kind of fair, I guess, because I feel like anything that isn't hydrogen or helium is kind of almost a rounding error.
Because it's 98% of the universe?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, am I understanding this correct, that metal rich can just mean like rich in a lot of different things? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it could be like a lithium, or it could be boron, things that are non-metals on the periodic table, but because it doesn't matter if you're an astrophysicist, because that's not what you're looking for.
Right.
Astrophysicists don't care about the metal.
Yeah.
But the metal will live on.
That hurts my brain because words have meaning and I'm a language person.
Right? Maybe a little angry. I don't know.
Oh, well, let's move on from there so I don't have to think about it anymore.
If you really don't want to think about it, I have this.
Oh.
I'm passing you the bottle.
Yeah, No, you do that. You have fun.
You've earned it.
Thanks.
But one more bit of housekeeping I think we could take care of before we get to our first question. In episode 114, which was actually just the last episode, we talked about designing our own pantheon of modern-day deities, and, as this is an open question, Chris allegedly has something to contribute to it. So here's Chris's 2 cents.
Thanks, Derek. So I was listening to the last episode after, finishing with all the killer robots. Just needed to relax a little bit.
Important work.
Yeah, you guys were talking about all the deities, assigning deities to various things. And Jim mentioned TV tropes for one reason or another. I think you were giving an example of a trope.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, well, TV tropes, they categorize things. And they assigned basically a bunch of characters becomes gods and goddesses of various things. So I'm giving a link in the other chat.
Ooh, That's going in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely put it in the show notes.
Just watch out, because it is TV tropes, everyone.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you want to fall down a rabbit hole, TV tropes is how you do it.
If you want to have a fun weekend.
Yep. And you will fall down a rabbit hole with that. I have before, and I will probably do it again at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will avoid looking at this until we're done recording.
You do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem.
So I suppose there's not else to do but to talk about our first question for this episode.
Yeah.
And question 1 this week is, what exactly are Metroids sucking out of their victims? And I would like to start with this one because I know that specifically some of our listeners are not video game enthusiasts. We get these comments sometimes. So every time we talk about like Nintendo IPs, I like to give kind of a brief summary of what the game is. And
yeah, absolutely.
So Metroid is this guy who runs around in space caves shooting aliens with his arm gun.
Wow.
Except it's not a guy. It's a girl.
Metroid's a girl?
No, the guy
I'm going to keep doing it.
The person walked right into that one. The person running around the caves is a girl, which was the famous revolution after the very first Metroid game. If you beat the game in like under 2 hours, the armor comes off to reveal, yes, that is a woman under that armor.
Yeah, and I believe it's the American instruction manual that refers to it as he.
I
believe
think
you're
so,
right.
yeah. For Metroid, the first one.
Yeah.
But in subsequent games, it has been corrected. Because none of the people apparently at Nintendo beat the game before they wrote the instruction book.
We can give an actual synopsis of it. I just wanted to do that to anger all of my friends.
To make all of the people's blood vessels burst.
Yeah, well, it worked.
So Metroid is a franchise in which the main character, Samus, is a bounty hunter who keeps getting roped into all these missions to exterminate these creatures called Metroids, which are extremely dangerous because they just kind of eat whatever they eat out of a person to kill them. And they are very quick to basically reproduce and take over a planet and kill everything on it. And space pirates are trying to weaponize them, which is always a good time. So a lot of the game goes through sort of various parts of this plot. And actually, the most recent game, Metroid Dread, puts a really nice bow on this storyline, if you ask me. So
I haven't played that yet.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, this is something that I knew. Metroid is one of the few Nintendo IPs that I actually am familiar with. Usually I'll be like, somebody else take over. But what's interesting to me is because, as many of our listeners probably know, I'm a pretty big fan of Aliens, the Alien franchise. And Metroid was originally inspired by that series. And as I'm reading more about Metroids, I kind of learned just how much inspiration they took. So, like, Metroids are this creature that kind of look like a big jellyfish that float around in space, right?
Yeah.
But their history is that they were apparently like engineered by an ancient race, and as you said, Jim, people try to use them as weapons, but they always tend to break free and cause problems. And that's every Aliens movie. Except that Metroids don't, as far as I'm aware, burst out of people's chests.
No, they hatch from eggs laid by a queen.
Yeah, which is also an Alien reference.
Yeah, or bees.
Or bees. Well, the whole idea that they're kind of like insectoid in life cycle, I guess.
Yeah, because Metroids go through like molting cycles as well.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much Metroids were comparable to insects, or for that matter, to the Alien movies until...
Yeah.
I guess I just never really thought about it.
Yeah, one really fun piece of trivia about the Alien movies, is that that's why Ridley, the space dragon,
Yeah.
like second to final boss, is named Ridley, because it's after Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question, what are they sucking out of their victims? I suppose just to elaborate on that, in the game, these jellyfish-looking creatures will latch onto you or other creatures and start to drain your health.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly they're feeding on you. But what exactly are they getting? And is it reductive to say, like, aren't they just eating you?
Well, so I read on the Metroid wiki a couple different things that I was surprised about, because I didn't know this, but sort of in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, actually, that makes perfect sense. The first thing is, apparently the victims will have their blood intact, so they're not drinking your blood.
Okay.
And apparently they don't show any signs of like puncture wounds or like bites or anything like that. A victim of a Metroid attack is kind of just going to turn into like a gray, like they tend to lose all their color. In extreme cases of Metroid predation, they just turn into dust.
Oh.
Yeah. I think I'm looking at the same page right now, and it says that Metroids live off life energy. So what the heck are they talking about with life energy?
Yeah.
I've got a couple of different theories.
Okay.
First theory I've got is like, bioelectricity. Like all the electrical impulses that go through nerves and stuff. Mm-hmm. If they feed off that electricity and make it so that you can't produce electricity and you die.
Right. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because we've seen Metroids feeding on power sources. We've seen them feeding on cyborg life forms.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, Samus's suit is not alive, but they can feed on the suit itself. And so that would actually track pretty well.
So a thought I had, because I looked at like different ways. I thought of like if they were sucking the power out of the suit, like if they're maybe electrical, but then I feel like that would be less of a threat if it wasn't actually like killing things when it ate them, which it clearly is. And so I thought, well, something that does something similar to that preys on other insects. I looked at how spiders feed.
Okay.
We think of how spiders drink things' blood, but they don't really. What they tend to do is they'll paralyze their prey, and then they'll inject. I don't know if it's their venom or if it's sort of a digestive acid to the inside of an insect, which will turn its insides into goop, and then they can like kind of drink that, which of course kills the insect. So that's not what's happening to Samus, because Samus is still able to run around and stuff. And if your insides turn into goop, you tend to not be able to run around as much.
Yeah, and the corpses are relatively intact, except for extreme cases where the corpse can turn to dust, which leads me to my second theory about it. But why don't you go ahead and finish first?
Well, my thought, I guess, that I was building to was that if it is draining some sort of renewable energy that a body creates, some sort of bioelectricity or something like that, why would it then want to stop you from producing that? Like, why would it want to kill you?
Right. And actually, what's interesting about that is that at one point in the series, Samus rescues a like newborn Metroid, like it hatches in front of her and imprints on her.
Super Metroid, yeah.
Yeah. And so at one point in Super Metroid, this hatchling comes and like attacks Samus, and then realizes, oh wait, this is my mom, and it detaches and leaves her okay, with 1 hit point.
although at that point the hatchling isn't so much a hatchling anymore as it is giant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's multiple times larger than Samus. Yes.
Yes, it's hatched. It's grown.
Yeah.
So these are at least somewhat intelligent beings, like at least as intelligent as, say, like a dog.
Yeah. The other thing though is that they feed so quickly that it's possible that like they latch onto something and they like kill it without really meaning to. Because like they will drain the life out of something in seconds. And so by the time they're done eating, they might just be like, oh, whoops.
Right. Didn't get
bad.
Enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Cookie Monster with cookies. He'll try to eat a cookie quietly, but then all of a sudden, me can't help it. Nom 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 nom.
Me love cookies. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me love cookies and human blood.
Oh wow.
That's when Cookie Monster and the Count have a team up.
Yeah.
Count.
It's the buddy cop movie we've all wanted.
Yeah.
Does the Count drink blood?
I would assume.
Technically, no, he's not really a vampire. He's just a count.
Oh, he's just got
Okay.
some sharp teeth.
But
up the
like,
front.
he's clearly a vampire, and I think he's just hidden it from Sesame Street. And it's one of those things that like we as the audience know, but like you have to remember that they live in the world, so they don't actually know.
Right.
I mean, that sounds like another question for a later time.
Yeah, you know what? Fair enough.
You want to put that on the list?
Sure.
Uh,
But Chris, were you going to say something else?
Yeah. The second thing that I think the Metroids might be stealing is water.
Oh.
interesting.
And the reason why I say that is it goes back to Super Metroid again. Admittedly, I've only played a few of the older games, so any of the 3D stuff is kind of lost on me. So I'm basing my theories on those. But a lot of creatures that are sucked dry by the giant baby Metroid that we mentioned earlier, you can run into their corpses and they crumble to dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of tells me, like, maybe they got all the water sucked out of them. I don't know.
That's actually, it's like my favorite part of the game because it's so atmospheric. Because you come into this room and there's like a mini boss that you fought a couple times before, and they're pretty tough. It's a thing called a Torizo, and it's kind of like a Chozo, except it's a bad guy. But you come into this room and there's one standing there, and it's like, uh-oh, and then nothing happens, and you go up and touch it, and it just turns to powder.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's not good.
And then, like, 2 rooms later, you come across the giant baby Metroid.
That's such a good part of that game.
It really is.
But yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense because especially that they are definitely leaving their victims desiccated husks.
Yeah.
And I think there might be more to it than that, but I think water has to go with it. Like, that's got to be a part of it, right?
Well, I was going to ask, and I guess I should have thought of water, but I was going to ask what could leave something like that, and dehydration would be a good... So I think you're right that it's not only water, but like...
True, yeah.
Water is... I didn't think of that.
Water and bioelectricity? I mean, it seems like a pretty decent combination.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, that makes perfect sense. Because I was also thinking about the bioelectricity side of things, but then I was like, but that's not going to leave you a desiccated powder. So if it does both, which I mean, I would think Metroids would get thirsty. They're living creatures.
Mm-hmm.
They're like 80% goo inside of their little jelly bucket.
I mean, jellyfish need water, though.
Jellyfish are water.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so... Well, Metroids they have like stuff inside the jellyfish bulb too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're almost kind of like cells in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you look sort of and I think that canonically there's not a great understanding of what's going on inside of the Metroid,
Mhm.
because there's like the little red balls, and I don't think anyone really knows what those are.
You know what? I didn't further investigate this, but I typed into Google earlier today anatomy of a Metroid, and apparently there's a book.
Really?
I didn't investigate it further, so it might just be like an art book or something.
I just want to own that book. I always thought it was interesting how Metroids can change form, but very importantly, this only happens on their home planet, which I think is interesting because I can't think of a mechanism for why that would be the case. But
So you're saying that they morph their shape, so like they xenomorph.
Yeah.
And another Aliens reference.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, did you see a picture of an Omega Metroid?
I probably have, but I didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah, if you Google that real quick, that's a xenomorph.
Yeah. Well, I knew that the franchise was like clearly inspired by, and then just reading all the deeper lore, I was like, oh, it's actually kind of just an adaptation of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's so on the nose.
Which, hey, I like both of them, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah. The other thing I was kind of considering, and I'm pretty sure this wouldn't work, but I was thinking, what if they were like somehow draining the energy out of atoms? Like,
Well,
but I
you'd
would
know
think
more
that
about that than any of us, I think.
and I mean, this would also sort of boil back down to electricity again. So
Sure.
it's not too different than what we talked about. But if you were like to drain the electrostatic forces out of like atoms or something, and then the atoms just like couldn't form a cohesive bond anymore, and they just kind of fell apart.
Oh, are we getting into four forces now?
I hope not, because I'm pretty sure if you negate the strong nuclear force, then you just turn into gamma rays.
Yeah.
And then you're the Hulk.
It's a bad scene all around, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I know so little about the four forces. I actually ended up doing a paper on them in high school physics, and that stuff gets wild.
Oh yeah.
I assume there's 4 of them.
You assume correctly.
That's what I know about it.
Strong nuclear, weak nuclear, electromagnetic, and gravity, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounded way more over my head than it actually was.
I know how gravity works, at least. Well, I don't know how it works, but I know that it.
You
I
know
know
that
like,
it
a
works.
math problem
Does anybody
that will
know
tell me.
how gravity works?
So
Not
far,
yet.
no. Because matter bends space, and that's as far as we got.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
things get wild once you get subatomic.
Yeah.
I read Relativity for Babies. That's what I know about it.
Hey, so did I, actually.
Yay! You had a better reason to read it than I did, I think.
Yeah, but it's cute. I might have read it anyway. The last thing I wanted to posit is that perhaps in Metroid world, people just have souls. I mean, like, not to say they don't have souls in this world, but like the soul is more maybe like a quantifiable substance in that world that can be removed by a Metroid. So Metroids are more like demons than they are aliens, but...
Well, they are alien to our understanding.
True.
And, well, so yeah, I mean... I looked briefly at the wiki that you guys mentioned. I didn't have time to read through it because I wanted to read more about spiders. But I saw that at one point it said they drained the life energy, and life energy was in quotes.
Yeah.
And so I clicked on the hyperlink, and it just took me to like energy in the Metroid game is represented by the, and I was like,
oh yeah, I did that exact same thing.
Yeah.
Game mechanic thing
Yeah.
that doesn't answer my question at all.
But on the other hand, maybe it is that in that universe, there is like a life energy that is also quantified by said game mechanic. And so that could be like, instead of, there being like things like calories and nutrients and stuff, it's just like all lumped together as like a generic, like, oh, life energy.
Yeah, I mean, there are stories where, like, I'm thinking Gurren Lagann, where human beings have spiral energy, and like the Beastmen try to steal that from them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's not outside of the.
Yeah.
Speaking of the world working differently than our real world,
Gurren Lagann.
that's a good segue.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I want to talk more about weird physics in alternate worlds. So maybe we should move on to our second question.
Yeah.
So question 2 this week comes to us from Jim, as a matter of fact. How could you make a hydrogen bomb in Dungeons and Dragons?
I remember that we had not a conversation about this, but I remember us like this came up at the table of a game, and we were like, "Oh, we should just put that in the podcast." And I don't even remember the context anymore, but
Well,
we didn't make the hydrogen bomb, as I recall,
We did. I don't think we were able to with the resources
with our
at our
level
disposal.
5 characters.
Okay, so let's nuke Faerun.
so, okay, I've got a question here.
Sure.
Are we talking making an actual honest-to-goodness hydrogen bomb, or are we just talking something that might resemble a hydrogen bomb?
All of the
'Cause
above.
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever way you want to approach this.
Well,
Okay.
let's start there because I did want to say that, like, I actually have that question you just asked written in front of me in my notes. Because if your goal is to make a hydrogen bomb for the sake of making a hydrogen bomb, okay, we have to start there, and then it's just how does it work? But if your goal is just to blow stuff up, I originally thought there's spells and stuff. There's like magic stuff.
Yeah, there's plenty of spells that you can use to blow stuff up. I mean, Fireball's a classic for a reason.
But I took a couple, and I know there's a lot of homebrew and this stuff is open to subject to debate and everything. But now that I've done the research, I'm less smug about it. I think maybe a hydrogen bomb would still be of value in that regard.
Okay.
Because the most powerful spells, and I should preface this by saying this research comes from official Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. We can talk about other fantasy worlds, but in official Dungeons and Dragons, the most devastating straight explosive spell I could find was a 9th level spell called Meteor Swarm.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing.
And just without doing calculations of how many dice are equal to real world destruction and stuff, I instead looked at the fact that Meteor Swarm deals damage and destroys objects in a 40-foot radius, which is an 80-foot area. And Hydrogen Bomb is anywhere from like 5 to 10 miles. So yeah,
there's you definitely got to spike things up. But I mean, it's a good start.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if we want to talk pure raw power, let's talk the wish spell.
Okay.
Ooh,
because wish basically allows you to do anything.
Yeah.
So you could say what you want and it will happen. Caveat: it is extremely open to interpretation. And some players will be very, very careful about how they word their wishes. Otherwise, a DM could take it in a direction they were extremely not expecting.
Which is the correct way to do it.
Yes.
Nothing is free in D&D.
Yeah.
Nope. One other thing that immediately came to mind for me, one of the settings is Eberron. Are either of you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Eberron, for listeners who might not play Dungeons & Dragons, I guess is kind of diesel punk-ish World War.
Yeah, diesel punk, steampunk, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there's an event in the Eberron timeline called the Day of Mourning. And I'm reading directly from a wiki here. The Day of Mourning was the event in which the nation of Sire was destroyed in a magical holocaust of unknown origins.
Oh.
So if you want to stretch the definition a little bit, and knowing that this is like diesel punk or steampunk, so the technology is farther ahead than your typical D&D setting, was the nation of Sire destroyed by a nuclear bomb or some equivalent thereof?
Yeah.
Because the very next sentence of this is the cause and origin of the morning, which is what they called the event, is unknown. There are conflicting eyewitness accounts that include a blinding light or mists originating from the capital.
A blinding light is pretty telling.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So there's different schools of thought, and I guess that would be open to the way in your particular Eberron game you would want to run it. I don't know if there's an official canon. There probably is. I don't pay attention.
I mean, if there is an official canon, it's not been released to the public.
Okay.
So as far as the population in general is concerned, there is no canonical answer.
Fair enough. And I
think one of the reasons is so that you can fill in the blanks in your game.
Right. And again, the correct way to do it.
Yeah.
But so as far as I understand it, the world of D&D, and at some point I'm going to be referencing some stuff I took from Pathfinder as well. So like this can open up to various fantasy settings.
Right.
But as far as I understand, the world of D&D has mostly the same stuff as Earth, except also magic on top of that.
Right.
So in theory, you could make a hydrogen bomb the same way you could in real life, but like it would involve advancing technology and getting certain machines that like don't exist in the time of the setting.
Right.
But then we deviate in two different interesting ways. So this is actually from Pathfinder, but in Pathfinder, there are technologies that reference fission and fusion, thus proving that atoms do exist. And people have then suggested that if you have magic, do atoms need to exist if there is magic? Does physics need to exist? And as far as I can tell, creating something like a snowball in this setting is using like conjuration magic, which people have then explained to me that the way that works in D&D is that they're drawing matter or energy from another plane because they have multiple planes of reality, so now we're deviating from how the real world works as far as we can tell. But still, there's this internal consistency in the closed system of the planar, the planes. So you can draw energy from somewhere else. So you're not creating something. It's still like conservation of matter. But I've almost lost the plot, so I understand if people have tuned out already. But I also know that in Dungeons and Dragons specifically, I know Jim has talked about phlogiston before.
Oh, yes.
In the Dungeons and Dragons lore, outer space is made of this substance called phlogiston. And this has recently been reintroduced as canon with the release of like Spelljammer in 5th edition. So these are alchemical ideas that we've disproven in the real world, but are assumed to exist in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Which leads me to wonder, if you could create a hydrogen bomb, would it have to work with some sort of magical element?
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost have to, because it would depend on the physics of the world where you're in. Yes, we have nuclear physics here, but they may not have that in Favorite or something. But they've got magic, so it's kind of got to go along those theories.
And a long time ago, we talked about how technology would have developed if magic exists. And so your reference of Eberron leads me to believe the fact that it could have been a nuclear bomb, but it also could have been some really powerful magic. It could have been a combination of the two, right?
Yeah. And what's to say that some crazy wizard somewhere because wizards make their own magic all the time. Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Who's to say it's not some, I don't know, Noodle's nuclear bomb.
Noodle's nuclear bomb.
Noodles, I don't know. I got nothing.
Well, because, I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty simple, I would think. Not simple, but the idea of just taking hydrogen and making it fuse,
right?
All you really need to do is compress it and heat it until it decides to fuse. And at that point, it just explodes. So you just have to have a spell that would compress this hydrogen. I think that you have to heat it up to several million degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. First one, then the other. And but I mean, if you do that, I don't see why you couldn't,
Right.
Yeah.
If you know the scientific process that is taking place, but don't have the technology, you could use magic to replace that. So you could use control water and create elements, and I'm making stuff up, but I'm sure these things exist. For example, you're using plutonium or something. There's probably some spell that allows you to create or transmute matter, that you could create irradiated materials or something.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that's going to be high-level spells. This is not something for dabblers. You got to put some real research into this. But then again, you have to put real research into a nuclear bomb too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
On that note, I would also probably make a ruling. Now, this is subjective, but I would probably make a ruling that if I were running a game and there were players who were in real life, I know how to make nuclear fusion happen. So my character is going to use his spells to make these things. I'm going to be I don't think your character knows that would work.
The other thing is you have to consider, as a character that is making nuclear fusion happen, I mean, there's a radius to this, and it is bigger than your map.
Yeah, what's the range on these spells?
Yeah.
A lot.
If the spell's range is 120 feet, which I think is, if not the maximum range that you can have, at least up there. It's the highest I've seen.
240 if you have spell sniper.
Okay, 240 feet is not going to keep you out of the blast radius of a nuclear explosion.
Nope.
So don't dabble with forces that you don't comprehend.
That's the real moral.
That's good advice for life in general. Really.
Yeah.
Stop trying to blow stuff up.
Yeah. Oh man. The other thing I was thinking about is just if you had, I know the question asks for a hydrogen bomb.
Yeah.
But
well, you asked for a hydrogen.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I am
really.
the question asker for this one.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, when we talked about it, we talked about a hydrogen bomb for, I think it had to do with water, actually, is what we were discussing. If you heat water up this much, it splits into oxygen and hydrogen. And then, but anyway, so if you just wanted to make a fission bomb.
Yeah.
There are ways, I think. I'm not as familiar with the mechanics of this as I am for a lot of the spells and stuff, but I think you can transmute stuff alchemically into different elements. So you could just make a sphere of uranium that is big enough to just go critical.
I mean, well, yeah, that's what you don't necessarily need the Hadron Collider or anything like that.
No, yeah. You shouldn't do it.
You shouldn't do it. Again, don't do any of these things.
Yeah.
Just all you...
Or do and tell us, because I want to know about the TPK that results.
I mean, I mean, you get into... One of the issues with this question, because I read... Most of the information I got was from forums. And most of the stuff that I was reading that was fascinating and I couldn't directly tie into this question, which is... because there was a lot of it and it wasn't specifically talking about hydrogen bombs, but I did find there was a nuclear technician, or is how he introduced himself on this forum, that was responding to, that's where I got drawing the snowball from the plane of water. And his assertion was that you're not creating something, you're taking energy from another plane, so it's internally consistent in that world. One of the issues is that if you were to run a game where the players were trying to build this bomb, you are not working in an internally consistent system. You're working in a system where all of the people are going to have disagreements about what the rules are.
Okay.
Is my speculation. I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we want to talk about different systems, let's talk World of Darkness Mage,
Ooh.
either Ascension or Awakening,
Mm-hmm.
because I think I've only played Mage the Ascension once, Mage the Awakening once, and neither campaign was very long, so we didn't get too far into it.
Mm-hmm.
Fair.
But from my experience with it, it's pretty free form, which means if you can think it up and justify it, you can do something about it, which means it's just a matter of thinking about it and justifying how to do it magically.
Yeah, because I've actually played some of Mage, I've seen some of the higher level spells where it's like, manipulate temperature, and because one of the fields you can go into is like forces, and it's like manipulate temperature, manipulate like gravity, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that if you were, had enough dots on the right things and rolled enough successes, you could easily make something detonate like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the problem is Paradox is probably going to slap you in the next millennium.
That's what I was going to say. For those of you who don't, Mage is a game that kind of exists in the same vein as like Vampire and Werewolf. These are tabletop role-playing games.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, what you see is the same as before. Is that if you're not far enough back, it doesn't matter if there's a paradox, because you get evaporated too.
Yeah, there are so many like things you can do to get creative, but the game is kind of built with this sense of like, if you think of something to do, it might turn out to be too difficult for you to do just based on power level.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that kind of like limitation on like, you can't make a nuclear explosion because when you try to do it, even though you know what you're doing, there's this element called paradox, and it's just like, nope, you're not strong enough, and now you have a migraine.
Yeah, the universe actively fights back against you.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, oh wait, because there's this basically a consensus of what is realistic.
Right.
And when you step outside that consensus, Paradox says, no, and it punishes you.
Yeah. And that's a system where it is supposed to be assumed that everything acts the same way that it does on Earth. And the game is built in such a way that when you try to break the laws of physics, you get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's a fun little magic story.
Yeah.
It's a horror story, but
Yeah.
I feel like this is old news. But at one point I thought real early on, how could you make a hydrogen bomb in Dungeons and Dragons, when I was like, you could make it the same way you could in real life. I kind of thought maybe we were just going to talk about how to build a hydrogen bomb. I don't want to go into it because it's just a lot of math, but
yeah.
Yeah, and also the problem with that, I could see making the argument, but do you have a lot of the materials in these worlds?
Right. Yeah, a real hydrogen bomb needs like a lot of plutonium, actually.
Right. So like, even if there's a world where nobody says plutonium doesn't exist in Dungeons and Dragons.
But plutonium's not a naturally occurring element. We have to make it.
That's a fantastic point, Jim.
So uranium. That's
maybe.
naturally occurring.
I was going to say, this is stupid, but I was going to say that plutonium wouldn't exist because it wouldn't be named after Pluto. Because Pluto doesn't exist in Dungeons.
Okay, fine. So plutonium's called something else.
It's called.
They got the planar system going on.
Yeah, it's called Big Boomium.
I don't know I don't know any of the fictional deities in D&D, but like I wanted to make a joke that it's like this guy
Okay, hold on a second. Let me look that up. I'm curious now.
I'm all homebrew and I don't play official D&D because I like to write things. That's getting real in depth for your. That's like a lot of prep work. Is like I've renamed all of the naturally occurring elements based on the history of Faerun
jeez.
Yeah.
and the days of the week and the months.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, in other words, you're Matt Mercer at this point.
Yeah. I mean, people like him, so.
Yeah. Gods of the Multiverse. Here we are. Let's see. Winter, Wizard, Serenity, Myth, Fortune, Agriculture. I mean, we could start with Tempest, the god of war. Oh, wait, that's Forgotten Realms. Greyhawk. Eberron, we were talking about Eberron. God of Dark Magic. That might work.
There you go.
Yeah, Tempest, the god of war, is what I'm finding right now. But there's one Bane, god of tyranny.
Well, there you go.
I mean,
Banium right there.
Yeah, because I think of all the gods, if you're going to come up with a destructive weapon, a god of tyranny is probably going to be one of the ones.
That would do it.
It's the same thing, like functionally and physically, but it just has a different name because it's not on Earth.
Yeah. Or Talona, goddess of disease and poison. I mean, radiation.
Oh, there you go. I read that there was radiation in, it might have been Eberron, but they just represent it as like poison damage. So it's like very limited. They don't want you to do science. And to be fair, we're playing a game with our friends to have fun. Just because my friends like sitting around and talking about science doesn't mean everyone's do.
Yeah, I mean, most people aren't going to sit down and do the math of a nuclear fission weapon for fun.
Yeah, you got to prepare that beforehand.
You know a couple of people who do that, but...
Yeah.
But there was, I think it was kind of famous. There was a thing that was released on the internet that somebody had like written out how to make a hydrogen bomb with all like publicly accessible information.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
I did not. I'm curious
I have a link. I don't know if it's either a link to like a article that reposts it. I didn't read it extensensively, but I will.
As I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they got in like a lot of trouble from like the FBI or something, and then they were like, no, I just sourced this all from like public documents, and they're like, oh wow, you sure did.
Yeah, I think I think that's what's famous about it is that it was like, you know, you get put on a list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a little worried that I got put on a list.
Oh, I'm sure we've been on a list for a couple of years now.
All right, listeners, this week I can't really think of another way to segue other than how could you build a hydrogen bomb out of Metroids? I don't know. It's not a good one. It's not a good one, but I tried. Jim?
It's not a bad one.
Yeah, but it's also not a good one in multiple ways because a hydrogen bomb made out of Metroids is frightening.
If they're taking water from people, then there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that stored life energy.
Ooh.
Jim, do we have any listener mail this week?
We do. And as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog. You can like us on Facebook. You can tweet at vaguelysci. And this week, our email comes to us from Joe P. And Joe writes, I have some good Christmas-related news for Derek. A fruit cocktail tree is already a thing, and a thing he can get and have. And he included a link to a website that sells fruit cocktail trees.
That's awesome.
I need to see this.
I suspected that somebody must have done it. I just didn't look it up to verify. So I'm happy that that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm really happy because it was one of those things where I assumed that it's like, oh yeah, it can be done, but no one's done it because that would take work.
I am surprised that, like, I'm not surprised somebody's done it. I'm a little surprised that it's commercially available.
Yeah.
So neat.
I want a fruit cocktail now.
Yeah.
I don't think I could grow the tree.
And I could just get one off a tree?
And you just pick all the fruit.
Would it not grow up here? Is that the question?
No, I just think I would kill it.
Oh, fair enough. I got a pretty brown thumb myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that email, and if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the other great places podcasts like to hang out, and subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Yeah, tell all your friends, and then they'll listen. Yay!
Yay, numbers.
Numbers indeed.
Numbers indeed.
Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli. And don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. All kinds of cool stuff over there with designs that are sometimes inside jokes.
Sometimes, but if
What do
you
you mean
listen,
sometimes?
One of them's just the logo.
Oh, okay.
if you listen to the show, you'll be in on the joke. And then
Yeah.
when people are like, "What's your shirt mean?" you can be like, "It's from this show you should listen to," and,
Yeah.
and you'll mark it for us, and that's we're devious.
Yeah, but I think most of the stuff on there is inside jokes.
Yeah, I think at this point. But you got to get on the inside. That's the
Yeah,
secret.
you are welcome to be in on the joke.
Yeah.
That's the difference here.
Buy our stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you to Chris for being our guest this week.
Always a pleasure. I think I'm gonna find somewhere in this base where I can fall down and take a nap.
Well, I mean, clear out all these dead robots from our recording studio first.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, that'd be...
I mean, they're already dead.
I know, but like that one's on my chair.
We can eject the bodies in the morning.
I want to sit down now.
Okay, fine.
For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I'm Chris.
And we'll see you next time.
Toodaloo, everyone.
Goodbye.
That'll hold up in court.
I think so.
Yep.
That's it. There's a paper trail or an audio trail,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
whatever, corroborating evidence.
Right.